Hello, my name is Kailei Carr. I am the co-host of the Beyonding podcast. I am so happy to be here with my sisters for this part 2 conversation. If you remember, our last podcast episode featured the Beyonding retreat and a conversation that my three sisters and I led last summer before the 2024 Beyonding retreat. So we are back in full effect, this time to talk about what really happened. So if you remember, last time we were talking about what we were looking forward to, what going beyond limits meant, and what it was like at the Imiloa Institute based upon what Pascale, my co-host for the retreat, and I experienced before the Beyonding retreat. And now we're on the other side of it and really excited to talk about what happened and also how we are looking so forward to the next one, which is taking place in December of 2025. So if you missed last time, it's not too late for you to have the experience. Just to remind us, we were at the Imiloa Institute in Costa Rica, which was the perfect backdrop. It was in the middle of the jungle in Costa Rica, in the most beautiful scenery, but also overlooking the ocean. So we were only a 12-minute drive away from the ocean, and the energy of this place was indescribable. And it honestly was another facilitator of the retreat. So that being said, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, Myra Capri, who will be leading this conversation. So Myra, without further ado, let's get into this.
Yes, I'm so excited. Kailei, thank you for setting the scene as you did so well. I'm here with my sisters, as Kailei mentioned, and of course, we have the co-host of the actual Beyonding Retreat, Pascale Bourne, who's the CEO of Bourne Transformation Group. She is a speech language pathologist, but what sticks out to me about Pascale is just her willingness to be transparent, to be open, and to just share her journey with us as she goes along. So we're going to get a little bit of that today in this conversation. Then, of course, we have Dr. Naeema Olatunji, and she's a self-empowerment coach, a mistress of ceremony, and I'm talking a masterful one, and a divine prophetess. And what inspires me about Dr. Naeema is just her sense of adventure. And we'll get to hear a little bit more about that too. But this conversation is so critical because a lot of times you hear the beginning of things and we set it all up for you all in the previous podcast, but we really want you to know how things have unfolded and continue to unfold. What was so exciting was last night we actually had a dinner, and Kailei reminded us earlier that the exploration of how going beyond limits and the activation that happened in the jungle at Imiloa is still unfolding. That conversation really started last night. So we are inviting you all into a conversation that's ongoing, right? And one of the questions, and even one of the themes that was brought up was, what have we told ourselves is impossible? And Kailei and I visited that a little bit as we introed the retreat conversation, but we wanted to revisit it and dig and dive into what are we now seeing is possible. So we've gone through the retreat, so roughly about 4 months later. And so I'm excited to hear and to have you all share, ladies, what have you learned is truly possible after the retreat? And so, Dr. Naeema, I'm actually going to start with you because you so well crafted that question as you introduced yourself on the previous podcast. So how have you seen what's possible since the Beyonding retreat?
I think the thing that is the most profound to me, when we recorded it last summer, the question, what was possible, was far different than what I felt like when we were at the retreat. And as I shared with you all, and you remember that when we were in Imiloa, right at the very beginning, something poured out of me that I hadn't planned on sharing. And that was that my 25-year-old daughter, who was my middle child, had chose to be estranged from me almost 6 years. And it was one of the hardest things that I have endured. And I didn't want to share it at the retreat or ever. And I was in a lot of denial. And I certainly was at a place, because over 6 years, you ebb and you flow through a myriad of emotions. And when we were at the retreat was probably the pinnacle of my pessimism. I was trying so desperately to hold on to hope, but everything said that nothing was going to change. There was no indication for anything being any different. And I knew that the anniversary of her being gone, because I remember the exact day, the last day that I saw her, was coming up again. And I didn't know how that I was going to endure anymore. And what spilled out of me, it was the shame around what that meant if your child didn't want to be in your life. And 6 weeks ago, on a regular Sunday, when I didn't think anything was special, it was just regular afternoon, my daughter literally walked back into my life. And the question that I had been asking last summer when we recorded about what was possible, I can assure you that that was not on my radar. So many other things were, but it wasn't that. And the fact that she walked in, and it was so unceremonious, right? And I think that that is the divine speaking through in actions, that when you take your focus off of centering this horrible thing that you have decided that is just so bad in your life, and when you start truly focusing on what it is that God has sent you here to do, which is what I have been doing since we left Imiloa, as I've just been focusing on my new business. And I really was just doubling and tripling and down on what does it look like to serve other women with the gifts that I have. And then in walks my daughter. And I can assure you, sitting here 6 weeks later, what I think is possible is every damn thing.
I love it. I love it. I love that you posed the question and it opened up worlds for you. It opened up worlds for others too. And we'll have, stories that we explore. But I just first applaud you for this sense of surrender. And that's what I was hearing when you talked about how it was something you didn't want to share because of the shame, right? But you shared it anyway. And I see this letting go, this sense of surrender that happened, which the jungle sounds like it created this safe space for you to feel comfortable doing that. And you let it go. You let it go to the point where you weren't even thinking about it anymore. You weren't expecting it. A Sunday came and it showed up and you weren't thinking about, your daughter showing up, but she did. And so I just wonder to you what you experienced in the jungle that gave you this sense of, I can surrender this. I can talk and share about this. This is something that I've felt shame for 6 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
What do you feel like was different, or the jungle allowed to open up for you to share that?
If I'm 100% honest, it was the conversation that the four of us had in home.
Mm.
No, what's the room for yoga? Do you remember what that
Home.
Was
Yeah,
it
it's
home?
home.
it is?
Yeah.
Home.
Mhm. House of Masters home.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the four of us are there and I'm having a moment, and and it's just full of emotions and heaviness and a lot of sort of just judging myself. And Kailei said, let the jungle hold it. The jungle has capacity. Give it to the jungle.
Mm.
And I was like, say what now? Like, I'm a nature girl at heart, have been my entire life, but say what? and I went home, I went back to the room and I sat with that. So the very next morning, when I opened my mouth, when it was my turn to say, all is well, I'm so excited to be here. And what poured out was, "Bah!" Right? Like all of it. And so what I'd like to say in full transparency is that I didn't know in the moment what I was going to say, but I think that what started the surrender was I started it by simply letting go of my pre-scripted text, right? Like what I just knew that I was going to share. I opened my mouth and maybe it was trust that filled that vacuum. And when I was done, I was empty. But it was this beautiful emptiness because then what got poured back into me was all of the love of the women. Some of them were strangers. All of that love increased the capacity that I had long before I ever opened my mouth. And so I think that sometimes trusting something that sounds very foreign by somebody that I trust, right? And so in the end, I guess I did give it to the jungle, but it wasn't intentional. So I say that to say that for anybody who's listening and thinks that you have to come with this set of expectations, that you have to enter into an experience believing that it's going to look a certain way, you can have doubts and you can be confused about it, and you can still achieve the thing that was whatever was meant for you was always going to show up anyways.
That is such a word. That is such a word. What I got from what you just said was that sometimes if we're holding on, if we're allowing something to consume us, and we're holding on to that, we don't have the capacity to let God come in and do the work. It was consuming you. You had to let it go for God to come in. And after you were able to do that, then God was able to do that work. If you hadn't done what you did at Imiloa when we were at the Beyonding Retreat, you would not have had the room to even welcome her back in because you were holding on to the hurt and the pain of it so strongly. And I remember
make me cry today.
Yeah. Tears are healing. Tears are healing. And what I remember us talking about back last summer when we recorded last time was that every one of us that says yes to pouring in to others in these facilitation seats, we get it too. This is not about healing the people. It's about being a part of the process and the journey. And you, my goodness, what a testimony. What a testimony.
I was going to add to that, Naeema, that I remember when we recorded the first time and you kept saying, be open to what is possible, be open to what is possible. So it was like, it was a foreshadow for yourself and for all of us. And when you got there and you just opened yourself up, I think that's what allowed you to clear the space to then have space to receive her. Because I can imagine if you hadn't been open and you hadn't let that all flow through, what would have been possibly getting in the way of you being able to receive her in the way that you were. So that openness is what I remember and you displayed so beautifully.
Thank you for that. Something I just want to say lastly about it that I hadn't considered until you just said that, Kailei. And Pascal, you sort of, underscored it. Yes to receiving Sakaya, my daughter. Yes to that 1000%. But what I was full of is the grief and being at the retreat. My concern was about performance, about how I was going to show up, and I was going to perform and do the coaching and the facilitating. But truly, I was so consumed with the grief and the fear around my daughter not being in my life. What I could not be present to was the job that I really wanted to do. And that was to be present and in the moment, because that was drawing me, that was pulling me away. I wasn't fully present, which is why at the very beginning, I had to let that go. And in the letting go, then I could show up. But I hadn't considered that until you just said that, Kailei, how important for that was, because the work started then. And then months later for Sakaya to show back up. But that wasn't, that was not the catalyst. The catalyst was surrendering, giving it to the jungle. Because you don't know the things that you're holding that are filling you up, that you're full line. People talk about waking up on 10, right? Like their nerves are already, because that's what they're carrying. That's what I was carrying. And it does feel free now.
I mean, like we could end there, quite honestly.
Yeah.
That's an episode right there.
It is. It is what we're carrying.
Yes.
I love how open you were too. It was one of the things you said about Kailei saying, give it to the jungle. And that language could just be a little unclear sometimes, right? Like, how do I give it to the jungle? And what I heard you say was really that you just let it go, that you figured out what that meant to you. You took time, you went back to your room, you spent time with yourself, and you were able to open up and share with us. And so I'm so excited about where you are, where you're going, how this journey, how the jungle activated, the retreat in itself activated so many things for you. And I want to come over to Pascale, because in a similar sense, Pascale, what I observed and really appreciated about you as we talk about being open was just the story you shared on that first day. And I think it was a story that you said you weren't going to share. A lot of times we think things have to look a certain way. And even Dr. Naeema touched on it. As facilitators, we may hold ourselves to a higher level of, I need to show up this way because I'm the facilitator, right? And you shared a story with us. You were just very open about your own personal experience. So tell us a little bit about the experience for you, what has opened up for you, and what have you seen that is possible post-retreat?
I can remember I was sitting next to you, Naeema, when you shared your story, and we went around this big circle. Everybody had a chance to share what they were ready to release, what they needed to release in order to be fully present. And I felt like with each story, I felt more and more tension building up, because I knew I was the last person to share, and I wasn't sure what I was going to share. But by the time it was my turn to share, it was like this release of, really, it was like anger initially. It was anger and frustration, because I was carrying this heaviness that, as the facilitator, I'm supposed to understand and know and be able to not only pour into myself and heal myself, but everybody else in this circle. And I was like, I don't feel like I know all the answers, and I'm not hearing the answers coming to me as clearly as they should, because as I was listening to each story, I wanted to tap into, well, what can I give them during time that could help heal? And it felt like I didn't have the answers. And so my was just really venting. I was venting and I was mad at God. And I was like, why aren't you talking to me the way you're talking to everybody else? That's what it felt like. But what shifted for me was an acknowledgement that, one, my experience matters and my story is valid, even if it isn't the same as everybody else's story. And I'd shared this with you earlier, Myra. You and I were on an earlier call, and I was saying, like, this whole year, 2025 thus far, has been me in search of sharing my story in a way that I was not ready for. I was not ready for. But from the retreat, I think that experience helped me to open up and not be ashamed of whatever my story was. I was holding on to it so tightly and comparing it to other people that I didn't feel comfortable sharing. But it was like this floodgate that opened up. And once that floodgate opened up, it also allowed me to reframe my thinking of how I hear from God, from the divine. And once I shifted that mindset and that reframing, I started to recognize, I'm like, hold up, he does talk to me. He does talk to me in his own way. And it doesn't have to be in Myra's way or Kylie's way or Naeema's way or anybody else's way. It is the way he speaks to me. And so that shifted. Recognizing, acknowledging, being open to how I was receiving my messages, and then also being open to sharing my story. It has been literally what I've been doing for the last, 4 months? We said how many months we've been back? Yeah, is finding different ways. And so one of the things in a very practical way that has shifted for me is through social media. Everybody that knows me through this bonding group knows that it's been a love-hate relationship for me with social media. And I've shifted my mindset in how I can use social media to help share that story. But I needed to first be able to acknowledge that my story was valid. It was worth sharing. And now that I've gotten to that place, I am so much more open to it and free and really enjoying what that has looked like.
So good.
Can I just say one thing? You were sitting next to me, Pascale, and I felt all of the energy, the tension that was building, and you were sobbing. And I was like, this isn't coming from my story. This isn't about, because you hadn't started crying until I started talking. And I was like, this isn't it. And watching you release was so powerful. But this is the thing that I got from you. And I don't know that I've shared it with you. When you turned the lens on yourself and said it wasn't about the rest of y'all, and I'll let you tell that.
Yes.
When you turned it on you and said, y'all are on your own, we were like, because everybody got freed in that moment, because you chose to free yourself, because everybody went there with some level of, I need to perform, I need to do something. Everybody did. And you said it, and the rest of us all got let off of the hook because you said yes to turning it inwards.
Thank you.
Yes, you did.
Is it okay to talk about that, you think?
Let's share the acronym.
Yeah. So this actually came from my therapist, as I was just sharing the desire I've always had to be a nurturer. And in that, I kind of went to the extreme of over caretaking and feeling like I needed to nurture and take care of everybody else. And so he shared this funny story that made it light, but also made it very real, that I was out there trying to save all the HOEs, which we ended up turning it into happiness over everything, which was perfect. Happiness over everything. But in that moment, thank you, Naeema, for taking me back to that. in that moment of me just sharing it all, then I realized I'm like, I can't save y'all HOEs. I'm the HOE that I need to save right now. And it just, again, it brought like this lightness to it, but it was so real. And I think because of that recognition and acknowledgement, I have been able to turn it inward, and the inward story has been what I've been sharing with people. It's the journey. And the biggest thing for me in that journey has been that this is, I didn't arrive here all made up and put together and elevated consciousness and all of that. It has been a journey. And I think that's what people need to hear when we do share our stories in whatever format we choose to do that. It helps people to feel seen. It helps people to feel heard, and it helps people to feel validated. Because I do think that sometimes when people share their gifts and services, it can sometimes feel like it's unobtainable as the person who's watching. But when you share your truth, and that's what I've learned, that in my story, in me sharing my truth, it allows people the permission to see themselves and to also have their story be valid for themselves.
Goodness. Listen, thank you, Pascale. Thank you for reminding us of that story, and Naeema for bringing in the levity. I have to just interject a little with my experience and my journey. And when you said it's so true how Naeema confirmed and validated what you said actually liberated me personally. And I know it definitely was true for others in the circle. But I had just come from my journey to Imiloa was on the heels of my father being sick in the hospital.
That's right.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
With sepsis, and he was knocking on death's door. And when I say knocking on death's door, there was a point I was in the hospital, and he was in the hospital for about 10 days before I even came to Imiloa. I didn't think I was going to come. It was the day before, maybe the night before, he had gotten out of ICU and they moved him to a regular room and he was stable, that I made the decision that I was still going to come. But he was knocking on death's door to the point where they were putting a mask over his face to help him breathe. And like, I heard him screaming. I heard the doctor screaming my father's name. And it was just this point of not even knowing if my father was going to make it. And there was just so much stress and strain, uncertainty, fear, sadness, and even frustration, because I felt like I was going on this journey, and it was somewhat self-imposed, but I felt like I was going on this journey alone. I was going to the hospital every day. I was managing my own work. I was trying to do all the things and carry all the weight and all the load to make sure my father was okay. And it wasn't until, first of all, I knew I could come and I felt safe and my father was in a good place. But I showed up in that space, and what you said just gave me so much release and so much freedom. I didn't feel like I had the time to prepare like I wanted to, and, kind of show up in a certain way. All these expectations I had put on myself of how I need to show up, and I need to say this and do this and perform in this way. And I was really attaching like the work that I do to my worth. And it was showing up, and how I was showing up for my dad at the hospital. Like, I'm going to be there every day. And if no one else is here every day, I'm going to be there. And this is me validating my worth. And I'm going to show up a certain way at Imiloa. And this is me validating my worth. And I let it all go. I had to let it all go because I couldn't control any of it. It was completely out of my control, completely out of my control. And I had to surrender and realize who had control the whole time. And it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And so that's what Imiloa was for me. That's what the retreat was for me. It's just this place of reckoning with me thinking that my work and how much I can do and show up for people and hold all of these things is related to my worth. And it just isn't. That's exhausting. That's exhausting.
How many women was that true for there? That
Yeah.
you releasing it? How many other women just did the same?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah.
Yes, I love this consistent theme of surrender and letting go. And like we get the stronghold on everything and when we just release.
Yes.
Wow. Like that's when we see what is possible.
Mm.
That's the only way to see what is possible. Because when we surrender to a higher power. And a higher power who has perspective far greater than we have the opportunity or potential to.
Yeah.
So we're limiting ourselves by these strongholds. We are so limiting ourselves, but we're human, right? We're human, and we think, oh, well, I have this big brain, and I've achieved all of these things, and I know some things, and I know better.
Yep.
And when we let go, we let God step in and see what's possible and impossible. Like if you break it down, it says I'm possible.
Yes.
It says I'm possible.
I've never even thought of that.
Yep.
Wow. What is possible? Kailei, when you were talking about letting God in, I was also picturing like our light that's within being able to break free from being dimmed. I think that, the stronghold is also sometimes imposed upon us from the world, from different experiences, from our mindset, all of that. And I picture like there's this light within that these things just layer on top of. And so when you start to release the stronghold, it's like chipping away those things that were dimming your light. So that when you fully surrender, it's completely broken open. And that is when your light, your full gifting is able to be seen and illumination happens. Dark spaces are filled with light that you had to give, but we couldn't give it until we released those things.
And going from hard to ease.
Yeah.
Like we talked a lot about that. And for me, just constantly needing the examples in my life. Because what I think that we're talking a lot about right now is the learned behaviors and the behaviorisms and the patterns that we have adapted over time. It's because it worked. And oftentimes they work because we're in crisis. But then when we're out of crisis, we don't reevaluate and let go of some of the things that no longer are serving us in whatever season. And so we just adapt them in and year out, and then they become the thing, and we're holding so strong to them. But I think that, the universe is trying to like send us messages like, let go. But if you're holding on and you're dangling by a rope because everything else is so stressful and you don't know how you're going to survive. And if you let go, then you could possibly die. And if you die, then birds are going to fall out dead from the sky. Right. And you don't even realize that that's what you're doing. But in the surrender, in the trust, then it becomes easy. Then you have more ease in your life, and there's more of that flow that you talked about. And the trust, like all of the light, of course, would shine because the things that served you once upon a time, because we shouldn't be in a place where, and I say this to me, that I'm, constantly, degrading myself for having thoughts or behavior patterns because they did serve. It was just that time, that season. But to continue them doesn't seem to make sense anymore. And letting go and watching the examples of all of the things that happened, at least for me, that I was like, oh, it can be easy. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was working extra.
It can be
And you didn't even need
easy.
me.
It can be easy.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I was gonna just first of all, thank you, Naeema, for that beautiful reminder. Kailei, I want to hear about your experience, and I'll ask it in a different way. I definitely want to know, what you see as possible now, but in a different way. What do you know about yourself now that you didn't know before the retreat?
Ooh. Ooh, that is such a powerful question.
Mm.
What is coming to me right now is that I do have capacity to let God step in and to not curate every single thing.
Mm. Ooh, is that more surrender?
I think so. I think we have a theme here.
I think we do.
And not just say that I had a stronghold, like was holding on tightly, because Pascale and I were very intentional about crafting and curating the experience for there to be space.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between knowing the approach and experiencing the approach and seeing what happens when you follow that. So
Mm.
we knew that we needed to have space. We knew on an intellectual level that we could allow the jungle to hold it.
Mm.
We knew on an intellectual level that the people who were there would contribute to that, to the experience, and that we didn't have to over facilitate any of us four. We did not have to over facilitate. So we designed it as such, but to see it in action
Mm.
showed me what is possible when we, even as hosts, as facilitators, can surrender
Mm.
to what's needed in the moment. It was incredible. There were things that were said by people who attended that had we over facilitated, they would not have had the space to share,
Yeah.
right? If we had filled the space with things to do too much, then there wouldn't be moments like, we're all in there crying, talking in duos about what we about to release. And then we see this family of monkeys
Right.
appear to show us, to demonstrate for us what letting go looks like, what play looks like,
Mhm.
what being free looks like. If
Mm.
we were so focused on what was next on the agenda, we would have missed it.
Yeah.
If we hadn't released the stuff that we were carrying to the jungle, then the jungle wouldn't have had a downpour to let it go even further for
Mm.
us. If we hadn't handed it over, it would not have released it on our behalf.
Mm.
So for me, what I found, how I was better, was that I know what I know. Now I've experienced what I knew to be true. Like, I have evidence, I have the receipts. So now I know the approach to take in the further, and which is, it ain't about me. Move out of the way, create the space, let the transformation happen. And also, I am able to see what's possible through each and every one of the stories of every woman who is at the Beyonding Retreat.
Mm. So good, Kailei. A couple of things. One, environments matter. And I'm so grateful that you and Pascale picked this amazing place where we could surrender to the jungle. And it's truly felt. And so if that, just even hearing that doesn't really make sense to you, it's something that you feel when you're in certain spaces and certain environments. Being able to reconnect with nature, being able to just slow down and be still enough to appreciate the monkeys that we saw, the toucans, the butterflies. I mean, just so many things in nature that showed up, and they all have messages if you listen and if you pay attention, right? And so it was such a special environment to, what did you say? It was our fifth facilitator? to help facilitate the healing in the jungle. And the other part is just the stories. And I want to invite you all to listen to some stories that we'll share soon after this podcast from others that attended the retreat and had their own experience at the retreat in the jungle. And those stories will continue to grow and evolve. And I'm inviting you all to listen to those. And before we close, if there's any just last words, last thoughts that either of you all want to share, I welcome you to share those.
I have something that I'd be curious about.
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested in knowing what our favorite moment was.
Gosh, there's so many. How do you decide?
I know. One of them. There were so many. So maybe not the favorite, a favorite.
I'm going to go back to the monkeys for a moment. I know there were so many different experiences, but the monkeys jumping from tree branch to tree branch, to me, it just symbolized what we all were needing to do, which was to let go and trust. It was showing us what, like you said, play looked like, but it was also what Naeema said with the ease. Like they didn't hesitate. They weren't like falling and then struggling to come back up the tree. Like they were just going through the jungle with such ease. And it is an image that I keep bringing back up as I am pushing myself beyond my limits, continuing to push myself outside of the comfort zones, because they weren't just jumping from these like secure, really thick branches or holding on to the tree trunk and then going to another tree trunk. They were going to the edge, the skinny end of the branches, and then jumping. And so for me, like that image helps me to be like, if my legs are shaking, if my heart is racing, that I am doing the thing. That's what that feels like, going out to the edge of the skinny branch and then leaping, but leaping knowing that you are held, knowing that you will not fall, and knowing that if I missed that one branch that I was aiming for and I landed on the other one, that too was meant to be. I was meant to do that. And it was very freeing, and it was a wonderful moment in the moment, but it's just stayed with me in so many different ways. So that's what I was thinking about.
I love that so much, Pascale, because what it also reminds me is that you can be joyful in your transformation. Like you could choose to put a smile on your face and you can laugh. It's hard, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's soul evolving, and you can still smile because those monkeys were so gleeful. And if we could understand their language, I bet you they were laughing.
Yeah.
And some moments that you can choose joy. And I don't have one particular moment, but what I would like to say is the amount of laughter. Oh my gosh, the belly laughs, laughing until we cried, laughing till our stomach hurt, laughing at the silly things, at the deep things, at when Pascale said, "I can't save y'all hoes." Like, oh my God, that was hilarious. Just the ease of it. Like, did she just? Yes, she did.
Show did.
Being on the beach and watching the level of competitiveness that came out, like that was just joy. And it was us really reconnecting. We talk a lot about our inner child. It was really us reconnecting to the things that I think that all of us loved about being kids, is that you could just be free. You could laugh when you wanted to. You could crack up at maybe a potentially inappropriate joke that's so hilarious. And you could just be so grateful to see your sister that you saw 5 minutes ago, but it didn't matter because you just want another hug.
God, I love that. So good. One of the moments that stood out to me was one of the circles where, if you're familiar with the term spirit, and we just let the spirit lead, right? And so it's this idea of what the energy requires in that moment. You just flow with that energy. If that term, letting the spirit lead, is unfamiliar with you or to you. And we did just that. It was a moment where there were stories shared, there were tears shed, and the moment required a group of us going outside, and some people were hugging and embracing. It was a moment where Kailei was being embraced in the middle of this circle, and we all just kind of flowed with what the energy and the spirit was just kind of showing us in that moment. And it was deliverance. It was liberation, not only for those that were in the circle, but those that were inside the room. And it was no decorum. It was a reminder that you don't have to follow like a certain agenda, and everything doesn't have to look a certain way. And if you're open and free, and again, if you surrender, there is so much liberty and healing and just letting go and letting things flow and not caring what people think and what it looks like. And that was big for me personally, someone that I tend to, the old me, cared so much about what people thought and what do they think of me, and if I do this and show up this way, and just to let go of all manner of decorum, to be in the moment and in the spirit, was liberty. And that moment for me, just, it meant so much.
Same here, Myra. Like that was, whoo, ooh, I can feel it. I can feel the energy of it, even in this moment. And what I would say, one of the favorite parts of the experience for me was how God continued to show up in so many ways through nature. So I mentioned the monkeys, but what I didn't mention is when we arrived in Costa Rica, like literally, we got off the plane, went outside for the first time. And there was a group of us because there were something like 9 of us who were on the flight coming from Atlanta. We looked outside and we were welcomed with the biggest rainbow that you have ever seen in your life. Like it was the widest, deepest rainbow. And so we're taking pictures and video and we're like, oh my gosh. And usually, you see a rainbow and then maybe it disappears, or you start driving, you're like, oh, where did it go? This rainbow was like apparent, illuminated in the sky for at least 20-30 minutes, because on our way to the hotel, we could still see the rainbow. There were people who landed after us who saw the rainbow and were welcomed by the rainbow. So that was in and of itself wild. Next day, because we had to spend the night in the main city in Costa Rica before going to the retreat location. Next morning, we're heading to the airport. What do we see 18 hours later in the sky? Another rainbow on the way to the airport. It's like, you can't make this up. You can't make this up. We get to the retreat location. We get to Imiloa, and we're on the tour, and we see these, not even on the tour, we got there, and there's these huge blue morpho butterflies. Enormous. And I didn't see another one past that first day. I didn't see another one for several days later, but they were all over. We go to the beach. We see dolphins. We see a pod of dolphins. We see a sloth. Like all of these things, like God he kept showing up to say, I am here. And I believe, look at what's possible if you're paying attention.
That's what's possible.
So good.
That's what's possible. And this is beyonding, ladies.
This is beyonding.
This is beyonding. And I'm so excited for you to hear other beyonding stories. And if you're listening on the podcast and want to check out the video, you can check us out on our newly launched YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thisisbeyonding. We'll make sure we put that in the story notes or show notes. Kailei, anything else that we need to close out? Ladies, this was amazing and so refreshing.
I feel like everything has been said. Just
Mhm.
let go, surrender, trust your knowing.
Mm.
And if you need to release it, if you need to give some things to the jungle, we invite you to join us back in Costa Rica in December 6th through 11th, back in the Imiloa Institute. And you can find out more information about the Beyonding Retreat at beyondingretreat.com. And if it resonates in your spirit, don't deny it, don't fight it, surrender to it, and join us there.
Pascale, Dr. Naeema, and of course, my amazing co-host Kailei. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
The joy is all ours.
Love y'all.
Love you.
I'll be completely honest with you. I wasn't sure what to expect. To have a group of women out in the middle of the rainforest, managing all of those personalities at a time, quite honestly, when I needed to be vulnerable and soft and turn inward and do my growth work. So I wasn't sure how it was going to take place. But from the moment we connected in the airport, even before we arrived, I felt genuine connection, heart-to-heart bonds already forming, and now I can say I honestly leave with a larger community of sisters that I never had before. It's interesting. The program has been so well thought out and so curated. It's as if I gave them a wish list of exactly where I needed to work on right now. That's the beauty of it. It is general enough that it's meeting all of us where we are, but it's also specific enough that I can see how to apply practical practices to my life even after I leave. Whether that is in the yoga practice first thing in the morning, or if that is exploring new and exciting ideas around limiting beliefs and challenging the stories that I've been telling myself about what is possible for my life.
My mom thinks I'm crazy for being here. I talked to her before I left, and I told her that I was going on this trip, and she was like, oh, like, who are you going with? I was like, I don't know. So I think what I've learned through this experience is that I'm pretty strong and fearless, and you know, I don't know that I knew that in the same way before this experience. You know, it's only been, I think, 5 days, but I've shared more with some people in this room than I have with people who I've known for years. So even though they were strangers at the beginning of this experience, I feel like they know me pretty well. And I feel like I have the honor to know them now too. So I'm walking away from this experience with a new sisterhood and community that I did not have. I think being here has grounded me in what's important to me, and allowed me to reconnect to myself. And I'm very excited I'm sad to leave here, and I'm excited to go back home because I feel like I don't know what the word is, but I have like this energy and excitement to like go and try to live my best life after being out of here.